Humans are statistically irrelevant. Yet, this one shattered your throne hall. The Citadel of Veilran was meant to be untouchable, a hovering bastion of dark, obsidian towers, suspended in orbit above subjugated worlds. Within its corridors, the overlords flaunted their captives before councils of sneering alien nobles, who judged value not by courage or skill, but by the strangeness of biology. Them every lesser race was a specimen to be classified, carved apart, and exhibited. And when the human girl named Mara was dragged into their vast chamber, chained and battered but glaring with eyes that carried an alien defiance, the overlords assumed they had gained nothing more than another exhibit. They had not yet grasped what it meant to label a human specimen. The instant the title left their rasping mouths, Mara's smile unsettled even the sentries. The chains seemed solid, but she tested them with subtle shifts, seeking weak points. Around her, towering figures in ritual armor murmured in harsh tongues. They spoke of slicing open her skull, mapping her strange vocal cords and charting the chemical surges of her nerves. She was graded and scored like a tool. All while the vaulted chamber trembled with the voice of the prime overlord proclaiming to the gathered vassals that humanity's last freeborn child had been seized. Mara tilted her head, caught sight of a faint control node in the floor, and whispered phrases no alien understood. The lights stuttered. Somewhere deep within the fortress, sirens wailed, muted by layers of arrogance and denial. It began as nothing. A vent overhead hissed as she altered her breathing pattern, deliberately tricking hidden sensors into misreading her exhale. The Citadel's climate regulators shifted in response, feeding more oxygen. To the overlords it was trivial. To Mara it was the first domino. With her chains braced against the stone platform, she drove her shoulder forward. Metal snapped, and sparks flew as the restraints fell. Guards advanced, weapons sizzling. Before they reached her, the Citadel itself betrayed them. Doors slammed shut. Without command, power conduits rerouted to unknown grids. The Prime Overlord roared for order, but Mara was already moving, ducking under a cleaving blade and wrenching a plasma rod from her assailant's grasp. He swung, clumsy, not like a soldier but like one who knew chaos itself could be wielded. The rod crashed into a console, spraying arcs of energy across the chamber. What followed was not battle, but the unraveling of control. The Citadel's automated systems, sensitive to biochemical cues and subtle triggers, had never prepared for human improvisation. Every reckless motion Mara made rippled into failures across the fortress. One moment the floor pitched 15 degrees, tossing aristocrats from their seats. The next, conquest banners above caught fire as the oxygen-rich air fed stray sparks. Yet Mara was not alone. Across the gulf of space, human resistance cells had been waiting. They intercepted the Citadel's corrupted signals, understood instantly, and hurled everything toward the fortress. Fragile frigates of salvaged alloys and flickering shields surged forward. Their captains, once convinced survival meant hiding, now found a beacon. Mara's wild defiance had become their rallying flame. The overlords fumbled to recover, but their prey no longer fled. Beyond the windows, human warships carved a jagged crescent, engines blazing like falling stars. Alien cruisers answered with disciplined volleys of crimson fire. Still the humans pressed. Improvised warheads detonated with wild timing, forcing their foes to reel. Inside, Mara fought not for dominance but for disruption. She raced through corridors, scattering guards with stolen shock charges, slipping through service ducts, plunging sections into blackout. She vanished in the smoke. The Citadel's command fractured further. She did not fight like Earth's warriors of honor. Fought like a survivor, with tricks, with surprise, with bursts of mocking laughter echoing through comms, bewildering her pursuers. The Prime Overlord's rage erupted in a broadcast that rattled the walls. He roared that no primitive could unravel their empire. But his decree came too late. From the docks, firestorms bloomed as human frigates tore into the hangars. Resistance fighters stormed inside, ragtag squads armed with weapons older than some empires. They did not march in ranks. They charged with fury, reckless and loud, and their presence turned the sterile fortress into a war zone of grit and flame. Mara met them at a junction where smoke curled beneath broken lake. She bore no title, no training. Her arrival with a plasma rod blazing in her grasp felt like command enough. Fighters roared when they saw her, and word rushed across comms that the Specimen had become their storm. The Citadel's chaos deepened. Sirens wailed. Overlords tripped over their robes, shrieking orders no one heeded. Mara vaulted onto a console. She smashed it underfoot, shouting directions that pierced through the static. Her voice carried no bloodline's weight, only the certainty carved from survival. Each word lit embers in the hearts of fighters who had only ever hidden. The Prime Overlord demanded her execution, dispatching squads of elite hunters. With every clash, humans adjusted faster than their foes could fathom. They fought dirty, inventive, feral, and each sudden tactic ripped the Citadel further apart. In the Grand Chamber, walls quaked as ships outside pressed the assault. Engines roared across comms, broadcasting humanity's defiance. Mara knew this was only the opening act, but already the fortress built to symbolize dominion groaned like a wounded leviathan. Humans had not yet destroyed it, but for the first time in ages its shadow no longer reigned unopposed. And as smoke thickened and enemies faltered, Mara laughed, a sound more terrifying to the overlords than any weapon. The Citadel reeled as if struck by its own storm. Mara plunged deeper into polished halls, each step defying the order they claimed. Unbreakable. Behind her resistance, fighters surged in through shattered hangars, patched armor, clattering voices hoarse with adrenaline and disbelief that they were actually seizing ground inside the monuments of alien rule. Prime Overlord's roars still rattled the intercom, promising riches for her capture. But his authority splintered. His hunters struck with precision, yet against humans their drilled formations unwound. One slipped beneath a towering guard, planting a crude mine that clamped to its armor and burst sparks up the walls. Another hurled a chair through a control board, collapsing the interface. In green fire, Mara darted through a maintenance corridor, crouching by pulsing conduits that throbbed like veins of the Citadel itself. She pressed her hand to a panel, humming nonsense melodies, nursery tunes twisted into chaotic patterns that confused the system's recognition. Doors hissed open where they should not, shields locked in empty halls, and sprinklers rained down on nobles scrambling in silken robes. The overlords had built with flawless logic but never accounted for weaponized mischief. Beyond the thick glass, the war climbed to frenzy. Human frigates zipped like gnats around Leviathan cruisers, baiting fire, weaving between lances of crimson light. Their hulls shuddered but endured, patched with scraps stripped from wrecks. One ship rammed a veiled corvette, both erupting in a blazing spiral that painted the viewports. Yet instead of fear, human voices over comms crackled with laughter and outrageous wagers, hurling taunts that jarred alien ears raised in solemn order. "You call this a fortress? My grandma's barn was harder to break into," a pilot yelled, skimming under enemy fire and releasing a payload of junk that shredded a squadron. Mara's role shifted from fugitive to conductor of chaos. Wherever she went, fighters followed. She climbed scaffolding in a reactor hall, waving her plasma rod like a banner, directing them toward structural weak points. Smashed pipes that spat steam to blind guards. She lobbed a stolen helmet into a console, shorting an entire wing and plunging hundreds of overlords into stumbling confusion. Each sabotage echoed into greater collapse, spreading terror that the fortress itself had betrayed its masters. The Prime Overlord unleashed his most feared enforcers, towering giants clad in armored carapaces etched with conquest. They cornered Mara near the core nexus, a vast lattice humming with power drawn from nearby stars. Her stolen plasma rod flickered, drained, yet she did not retreat. Instead, she called across her comlink, her voice unwavering. "Now!" At her cue, hidden saboteurs dropped explosives scavenged from their ships. They clattered like stones before erupting. The enforcers braced, shields raised, but the blast shattered the lattice supports. Energy flared, untamed arcs of light ripping across the chamber. Maradov, rolling beneath a collapsing beam, emerging coughing but alive. The nexus pulsed erratically, each flicker destabilizing the Citadel further. The Overlord's composure snapped. Aristocrats shrieked, fleeing toward shuttles only to find flaming bays. Guards barked and fought each other as discipline unraveled beneath falling banners. Yet still the Prime Overlord stood, massive frame a black tower. Against the tide, he swore the humans would drown in the fire they'd sparked. His voice thundered through every hall, but Mara's laughter cut sharper, human and impossible to measure. Inside, the battle blazed hotter. Human ships swarmed like sparks around a collapsing bonfire, refusing to yield, pressing forward. They lacked elegance, lacked perfect formations, yet their unpredictability shattered the enemy's rhythm. One ship faked retreat, then flipped and rammed a destroyer, crippling it. Another darted through wreckage of fallen allies, turning debris into cover while firing torpedoes. Each desperate strike carved deeper into the Citadel's defenses. Weapons faltered, shields flickered, whole decks went dark. But victory was not secure. The Overlords unleashed drone reserves, metallic swarms pouring from hidden bays, flooding the void with disciplined fire. Inside, armored hunters regrouped, charging toward the Nexus chamber, their boots shaking the ground. Mara wiped soot from her face, glanced at her dwindling fighters, and tightened her grip. She knew every act of sabotage drove the Overlords to desperation, and desperation was deadly. Still, humans would not yield. The Citadel was no longer a fortress of conquest. It was a crucible burning away the myth of alien dominance. Nat's heart, one girl once called a specimen, now laughed, daring them to take back control of a fortress already slipping away. The second wave was coming, heavier, bloodier, relentless. Mara braced for it, knowing the storm was only growing. The Citadel groaned like a wounded leviathan, corridors vibrating with failing systems. Alarms blared in chaotic tones as decks powered down, flared, then sparked apart. Mara stood in the Nexus, plasma rod quaking in her grip, chest heaving as hunters closed in. Their carapaces gleamed in. The lattice's wild flashes stepped steady, despite the trembling floor. But behind, Mara resistance gathered. Fewer now. Yet fire burned in their eyes, the fire of witnessing the unthinkable. An alien fortress collapsing under human chaos. The Prime Overlord descended from the high dais, his silhouette framed in failing shields. His voice rumbled through the chamber, vowing humanity's erasure. Yet as he spoke, the fortress shuddered again. Mara laughed, raising her weapon high. "You called me Specimen," she cried, her voice echoing through comms and halls. "But you forgot what makes us dangerous. We're unpredictable." She hurled the drained rod into the lattice, clanged once, then erupted, detonating unstable energy in a cascade of blinding light. Hunters stumbled, shields collapsing, and the Prime Overlord roared as control slipped away. Fighters surged forward, weapons flaring. The chamber drowned in sparks and smoke, humans weaving between towering foes with wildness no tactic could contain. Outside, the battle reached its peak. Human frigates, battered but burning, pressed in around the citadel, forming walls of fire. They were not precise, not ordered, but their improvisation ripped apart rigid formations. A corvette spiraled into a battleship, detonating a hole through its hull. Fighters lured drones into kill zones where jury-rigged bombs ignited chain reactions. The stars seemed to blaze brighter with each right. Inside, Mara leapt onto the lattice platform, sparks at her boots. The Overlord lunged, blades glowing with alien fire. She rolled beneath the right. Fighters roared encouragement, some even laughing as their fragile leader defied a conqueror. Mara kicked apart a console, unleashing more uncontrolled energy. The citadel buckled, walls collapsing, arcs tearing across chamber. The Overlord staggered, scorched by his own fortress. He swore humanity's end, but his words rang hollow. For the first time, the impossible fortress was falling to those enslaved. Mara pointed and shouted, "This is our chaos. Welcome to it." Fighters cheered, drowning the alarms. With instinct, not training, they fired everything they had. The Overlord's shield shattered. He staggered, raised his blade, then the floor split. The citadel's core ruptured, a bloom of light consuming the chamber. Mara was thrown back, caught by strong arms. Fighters dragged her through collapsing passages as fire swallowed the spires. They sprinted through burning hangars, hauling comrades aboard ships as walls caved in. Mara stumbled onto a frigate's deck, soot on her face, hair wild with static, and turned to the viewport. The citadel, once a symbol of dominance, cracked apart in fire and alloy. Alien fleets fled in chaos, their unity shattered. Some exploded, others vanished into the dark. The Overlord's final roar was lost in the inferno. Human ships gathered around wreckage, battered but alive with triumph. Erupted with shouts, sobs, laughter that code-like song. For the first time, the shadow was gone. Humanity no longer hid, no longer ran. Mara gripped a railing to steady herself, lungs raw with smoke. Fighters stared, awaiting orders she was never trained to give. She smiled, fierce through exhaustion. "We showed them who we are." The bridge erupted in cheers. Outside, the citadel drifted as broken ruin. Humanity had not just survived. They proved chaos, laughter, and defiance could topple an empire. As the stars burned bright, Mara laughed, not in mockery but triumph. The fortress that named her Specimen was and in its place humanity's future stretched wide, unshackled, unpredictable, and free.